My name is Elsa, and I'm a 32-year-old physical therapist from Seattle. 6 months ago, my life changed forever when a drunk driver crashed into my car. I always thought my parents would be there for me through anything, but when I needed them most, they never showed. What hurt more than my broken bones was calling my mother from the hospital bed, begging her to visit, only to hear her laugh and say those words I'll never forget. If you're watching this, please let me know where you're tuning in from, and hit subscribe to hear how I confronted my family's betrayal that hurt worse than the accident itself. I've always prided myself on helping others heal. As a physical therapist at Seattle Rehabilitation Center, I've guided countless patients through their recovery journeys after accidents similar to what would eventually happen to me. The irony isn't lost on me now. Growing up in suburban Portland, I had what I thought was a close relationship with my parents, James and Diana. Our family photos showed smiling faces at birthday parties, graduations, and holiday gatherings. But if you looked closely enough at those photos, you might notice how my younger sister Natalie always stood between our parents, while I stood slightly off to the side. The favoritism wasn't blatant enough to complain about without sounding petty. It was in the subtle details, Natalie getting the newer car, when we both learned to drive, my parents attending all her soccer games, while making it to only half of my swim meets, the way they'd interrupt my stories to ask Natalie about her day. Small things that accumulated over years. Natalie is more sensitive than you, Elsa, my mother would say. You're our strong, independent girl. Being labeled the strong one meant I wasn't allowed to need as much. I accepted this role believing that somehow earning my parents' approval through self-sufficiency would eventually bring their attention and affection. After graduating with my doctorate in physical therapy, I moved to Seattle for a position at one of the best rehabilitation centers in the Pacific Northwest. Despite the 3-hour distance, I maintained regular contact with my family through weekly Sunday calls and monthly visits back to Portland. I'd drive down, spend the weekend, and drive back Sunday evening, always making sure to preserve our family connections. My career flourished in Seattle. Last year, I received a promotion to senior physical therapist, specializing in trauma recovery. My patients were often people whose lives had been upended by accidents much like mine would be. I found profound satisfaction in helping them rebuild their strength and independence. My apartment overlooking Lake Union became my sanctuary, decorated with houseplants and photos of hikes along the Washington coast. 4 months before my accident, Natalie announced she was pregnant with her first child. My parents' excitement was overwhelming. Dad immediately started designing a custom crib in his woodshop, while Mom began knitting baby blankets and researching the best strollers. During our Sunday calls, it became increasingly difficult to redirect the conversation to anything other than Natalie's pregnancy updates. "We're going to throw the most beautiful baby shower," my mother declared one Sunday. "We're thinking a woodland theme with little forest animals. It's going to be perfect for Natalie." Despite feeling overshadowed again, I genuinely shared in their happiness. I ordered a special gift for my future niece or nephew, a collection of classic children's books with personalized inscriptions. I had already requested time off work to attend the baby shower scheduled for mid-April. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I assured my mother, unaware of how prophetic those words would become. In our last normal conversation before the accident, my father mentioned how proud he was of both his daughters. Natalie bringing new life into the family, and you, Elsa, helping rebuild lives. It was one of the few times I remember him acknowledging my work with such clarity. I held on to that comment like a precious stone, turning it over in my mind during the lonely nights ahead. 2 weeks before Natalie's baby shower, I was working late with a patient who had just undergone knee replacement surgery. Jeremy had been anxious about his recovery timeline, so I stayed after hours to create a detailed home exercise plan. It was past 9 when I finally left the center, the Seattle rain falling in sheets across the parking lot. I remember thinking I should wait for it to lighten up, but I was eager to get home after the long day. That decision to drive in that storm would alter the course of my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. But what happened after the accident would reveal truths about my family that had been there all along, hidden beneath the surface of our seemingly close relationship. The rain was coming down so heavily that night that even with my wipers on maximum speed, visibility was limited to just a few feet ahead. I remember gripping the steering wheel tightly, leaning forward to peer through the foggy windshield as I navigated the familiar route home from the rehabilitation center. I was only about 10 minutes from my apartment when it happened. A pair of headlights suddenly appeared in my lane coming straight toward me. There was a moment of disbelief, surely they would correct their course, but the lights kept coming. I swerved to avoid a head-on collision, but on the wet pavement my car hydroplaned. The next few seconds exist in my memory as disconnected. Flashes the sound of metal crushing against the guardrail, the sensation of spinning the airbag exploding against my chest, and then darkness. When I regained consciousness, I was already in the hospital. The steady beep of monitoring equipment filled my ears, and the harsh fluorescent lighting made my eyes water. A nurse noticed I was awake and immediately came to my side. "You've been in an accident, Ms. Williams," she explained gently. "I'm Nurse Sarah. You're at Harbor Medical Center." I tried to speak, but my throat was raw from the breathing tube that had been removed just hours earlier. Sarah offered me water through a straw, and I took small, painful sips. "What happened?" I finally managed to ask. "A drunk driver crossed into your lane. You've been unconscious for about 20 hours. The doctor will be in soon to explain your injuries." When Dr. Patel arrived, his expression was serious but kind. He explained that I had suffered multiple traumatic injuries, both legs broken with my right femur, requiring surgical stabilization with a metal rod, 3 fractured ribs, a punctured lung, internal bleeding that required emergency surgery, and a concussion. "You're going to need extensive rehabilitation," he said, the irony not lost on either of us when I told him I was a physical therapist. "Recovery will take months, not weeks. But with your professional background, I'm optimistic about your prognosis." The first few days were a haze of pain medication and brief moments of clarity. The pain was unlike anything I'd experienced, not just sharp and immediate, but deep and constant. Even with the medication, every small movement sent waves of agony through my body. I found myself thinking about my patients, wondering if I had truly understood their pain before experiencing this myself. By the third day, several of my colleagues had visited. Amanda, my closest friend from work, brought my phone charger, some toiletries, and a framed photo from my desk, a picture of me at the summit of Mount Rainier from a hike last summer. She placed it where I could see it from the bed. "Something to remind you where you'll be again," she said, squeezing my hand. The hospital staff was exceptional. Nurse Sarah became my primary caregiver, checking on me frequently and often staying a few minutes longer than necessary just to talk. The physical therapy team started working with me as soon as I was stable enough, though being on the receiving end of these services was a humbling experience. Through it all, I kept expecting my parents to walk through the door at any moment. I had called them the morning after the accident once I was lucid enough to use the phone. My mother had answered, and I could hear the shock in her voice when I explained what had happened. "Oh my God, Elsa, are you okay?" The concern seemed genuine. I had downplayed the severity somewhat, not wanting to cause them unnecessary worry, but made it clear that I was facing a long recovery. "We'll come up as soon as we can," my mother had promised. "Your father is just finalizing some details for Natalie's baby shower, but we'll work something out." That was the first sign that something was off. The prioritization of finalizing details over seeing their critically injured daughter seemed strange, but I dismissed it as shock and poor choice of words. Days passed. My colleagues continued to visit. Amanda brought fresh clothes and more items from my apartment. The doctors monitored my progress. Physical therapists helped me with small, excruciating movements. But my parents didn't come. Each day I would ask Nurse Sarah, "Has anyone else been asking for me? My family, perhaps?" And each day she would shake her head sympathetically. They called, of course. Brief conversations where they asked how I was doing, but quickly shifted to updates about Natalie's pregnancy or the ongoing baby shower preparations. Each call ended with vague promises about visiting soon or when things settle down. By the end of the first week, confusion had given way to hurt. I had been moved from the ICU to a regular room, making it even easier for them to visit. Portland was only a 3-hour drive from Seattle, a trip I had made countless times to see them. "They're probably just waiting until you're a bit better," Nurse Sarah suggested when she found me staring silently at my phone one evening. "Some people find hospitals overwhelming, I nodded, not mentioning that my father had spent 2 weeks at my grandmother's hospital bedside when she had pneumonia last year, or that my mother had visited her friend Janet daily after Janet's gallbladder surgery. They weren't afraid of hospitals. They were choosing not to come. As the second week of my hospital stay began, the physical pain was gradually becoming more manageable, but the emotional wound of my family's absence was growing deeper. I found myself watching the door every time footsteps passed in the hallway, hoping to see my parents' faces. Instead, it was always medical staff, or occasionally a colleague checking in. The absence of my family became a presence in itself, a ghost that haunted my hospital room as tangibly as the equipment monitoring my vital signs. 2 weeks into my hospital stay, I found myself staring at the ceiling, counting the tiny holes in the acoustic tiles to distract myself from both the physical pain and the growing emotional void. The realization that I had been in the hospital for 14 days without a single visit from my family had settled into a heavy weight on my chest, rivaling the discomfort of my fractured ribs. My recovery had been progressing slowly. The physical therapists had me attempting to sit up at the edge of the bed, an achievement that would have seemed trivial before, but now represented a mountain climbed. Each small victory was celebrated by the hospital staff, but the absence of my family to share in these moments made them feel hollow. That morning, I had received a text from my sister Natalie with a photo of her baby bump and the nursery they were preparing. "Can't wait for you to see everything, hope you're feeling better," she had written as though I were home with a minor cold rather than hospitalized with life-altering injuries. The disconnect between my reality and my family's perception of it had become too great to ignore. After my afternoon physical therapy session left me exhausted and in tears, I decided I needed answers. I picked up my phone and called my parents home. My mother answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted. "Hello? Mom, it's me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, Elsa, how are you feeling today, sweetie? Any improvement?" Her tone was cheerful, almost artificially so. "Mom, I've been in the hospital for 2 weeks now." I paused, gathering courage. "When are you and Dad coming to visit me? I really need you here." There was a brief silence on the line, followed by what sounded like paper rustling. "Well, honey, we've been so tied up with preparations for Natalie's baby shower. You know it's this Saturday and there's still so much to do. The caterer called with questions about the menu and the florist needs final approval on the arrangements." I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of disbelief and raw hurt. "Mom, I understand the baby shower is important, but I'm in the hospital. I've had major surgery. I can't walk. Don't you think that might take priority?" "Of course it's concerning Elsa, but the doctors are taking good care of you, right? And you said yourself that you're improving." Her voice took on a slightly defensive edge. "We can come up after the shower maybe next week when things calm down." Something inside me broke at that moment. "Mom, please." My voice cracked with emotion. "I really need my family right now. I'm scared and in pain and feeling completely alone. Can't you understand that what happened next would replay in my mind for months?" My mother laughed. It wasn't a full laugh, more like a dismissive chuckle, but the sound cut through me like a blade. "Oh, Elsa, you've always been so independent. You'll be fine. Your sister's baby shower matters more right now. This is a once-in-a-lifetime celebration for Natalie while you're going to recover just fine according to your doctors." I couldn't speak. The casual cruelty of her words left me breathless, as though I'd been physically struck. "We've been planning this shower for months," she continued, oblivious to the impact of her words. "Everyone's coming, all the family friends from college. Jeff's parents are flying in from Florida. We can't possibly reschedule. You understand, don't you?" In the background, I could hear my father asking who was on the phone. "It's Elsa," my mother replied to him, her hand partially covering the receiver, but not enough to block her words. "She's upset we haven't visited yet." I strained to hear my father's response, hoping for some defense, some acknowledgement of the wrongness of the situation. But all I heard was a mumbled reply and footsteps walking away. "Dad didn't even want to talk to me," I asked, my voice small. "He's just in the middle of hanging the decorations in the backyard. The forecast says there's a chance of rain, so he's setting up the canopies. Listen, I need to go. The bakery is delivering the cake in an hour." Tears were streaming down my face now. So that's it. The cake delivery is more important than your daughter in the hospital. There was a heavy sigh on the other end. Elsa, you're being dramatic. It's not like you're dying. The shower will be over this weekend, and then we can focus on your situation. My situation, I repeated incredulously. You mean the fact that I was nearly killed by a drunk driver and am facing months of painful recovery? Before my mother could respond, I heard Natalie's voice in the background asking for the phone. After a brief exchange, my sister came on the line. Elsa, hey, I'm sorry we haven't made it up to see you yet. It's just been crazy with all the preparations. You know how Mom gets with planning events. Natalie, do you realize what you're saying? This isn't just some inconvenient timing. I'm seriously injured. I know, she said quickly. And we're all really concerned. But it's just bad timing with the shower this weekend. Once that's over, I'm sure Mom and Dad will come up to see you. And I'll try to come too, though the doctor said I should limit travel in the 3rd trimester. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My entire family was prioritizing a party over my well-being. The revelation was as painful as the moment of impact during the accident. I have to go, I said finally, my voice hollow. Don't be upset, Elsa, Natalie pleaded. It's going to work out. We'll see you soon, I promise. I hung up without responding. The phone slipped from my hand onto the blanket and I broke down in silent body-shaking sobs. The physical pain of my injuries seemed to merge with the emotional agony, creating a symphony of suffering that overwhelmed all other sensations. I'm not sure how long I cried before Nurse Sarah came in for her regular check. She took one look at me and immediately set aside her clipboard. What happened? She asked, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. Through broken sentences punctuated by sobs, I explained the conversation. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face reflecting my pain. Oh, Elsa, she said when I finished. I'm so sorry. That's not right. That's not how families should treat each other. Maybe I am being dramatic, I whispered, my mother's accusation echoing in my mind. Sarah shook her head firmly. No, you've suffered major trauma and a long recovery road ahead. Wanting your family with you isn't dramatic, it's normal. It's human. She stayed with me long past the end of her rounds, just sitting in silent support. As the evening light faded outside my window, I faced a painful truth. The family dynamics I had normalized for years were far more dysfunctional than I had allowed myself to acknowledge. That night, lying awake despite the pain medication, I realized I had reached an emotional rock bottom. The family I had always tried to please, whose approval I had always sought, had revealed their true priorities in the most painful way possible. As I stared into the darkness, I wondered about the choices that had led me here and what my life would look like going forward. The morning after that devastating phone call, I woke to the hospital routine that had become familiar over the past 2 weeks. A nurse checked my vitals, a doctor reviewed my chart, and breakfast arrived on a tray, all clockwork events that now contrasted sharply with the emotional chaos inside me. Physical therapy was scheduled for 10 a.m. When the therapist Daniel arrived with his perpetual optimism, I almost asked to skip the session. What was the point of fighting through the pain if the people I loved most couldn't be bothered to support me? But some stubborn part of me refused to give in to that despair. Today we're going to work on standing, Daniel announced, adjusting the height of the walker he had brought. Standing, I repeated, eyeing my casted legs with doubt. I don't think I can. Not alone, not yet, he clarified, but with support and only for a few seconds. It's important to start the weight-bearing process, even minimally. As Daniel and a nurse helped me to the edge of the bed, excruciating pain shot through my legs and ribs. I bit my lip to keep from crying out. The process of pivoting to a standing position while keeping weight off my more severely injured right leg was an exercise in controlled agony. For a brief moment, I stood supported by Daniel the walker and the nurse. 3 seconds of achievement that cost what felt like hours of pain. When they eased me back onto the bed, I was drenched in sweat and trembling. That was excellent, Elsa, Daniel praised. You did better than most patients on their first try. The professional therapist in me knew he was right. It was a significant milestone. The injured woman in me wondered if it was worth the suffering. In that moment, I had a sudden flashback to one of my own patients, Marcus, who had suffered similar leg injuries after a motorcycle accident. I remembered encouraging him through this exact same exercise, assuring him the pain would be worth the progress. How could I really understand what I was asking him to do? I whispered to myself. What was that? Daniel asked as he made notes on my chart. Nothing, I replied, just thinking about my own patients. After Daniel left, I found myself looking around the sterile hospital room that had been my home for 2 weeks. The walls were bare except for the single-framed hiking photo Amanda had brought. The sight of it, me standing triumphantly on a mountaintop, now seemed like a taunt from another life. With sudden determination, I asked Nurse Sarah for paper and a pen when she came in for medication rounds. She returned with a small whiteboard and marker from the nurse's station. Will this work? What are you planning? A calendar, I explained. I need to track my progress. She helped me draw a simple calendar on the board, marking off the days I'd already been hospitalized and adding future dates. Once she left, I added a notation at the bottom, days without family visit 14. The visual representation of my abandonment was painful but somehow empowering. It wasn't just in my head, it was real, quantifiable. Each day forward, I would update that count, not as an exercise in self-pity, but as acknowledgement of truth. Over the following days, as physical therapy intensified and my strength gradually improved, the number on my whiteboard calendar continued to climb: 15, 16, 17. The calls from my parents became less frequent after our confrontation, and when they did call, I allowed them to go to voicemail. One message from my mother: "The baby shower was beautiful, Elsa. Everyone asked about you. I'll email some photos. Hope you're feeling better." Another from my father, sounding uncomfortable: "Your mother says you're not taking her calls. I know you're upset, but don't be stubborn, Elsa. Family needs to stick together." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. I deleted both messages without responding. In place of my biological family, I found connection with the hospital staff who had become constant presences in my life. Sarah brought me books from the hospital library. Dr. Patel would stay after his rounds some days to discuss physical therapy techniques, professional to professional. The night shift nurse Jackson snuck in extra pudding cups because he noticed I only ate dessert on the hospital trays. Most surprisingly, I formed a bond with Miguel, a patient in the room across the hall. He was recovering from a construction accident and, like me, received no family visitors. His parents had returned to Mexico years ago, and his brothers lived on the East Coast. During physical therapy sessions in the rehabilitation room, we often encouraged each other through particularly difficult exercises. "Family isn't always who you're born to," Miguel told me one afternoon as we both rested after therapy. "Sometimes it's who shows up when you need them." His words resonated deeply. The hospital staff, my colleagues, even Miguel himself, they had shown up. They had demonstrated more care and concern than the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The realization was both heartbreaking and liberating. It allowed me to see the pattern of my family relationships with new clarity. All those years of feeling slightly less important, slightly less loved, they weren't imagined slights or oversensitivity on my part. They were real inequities that had finally been exposed in the starkest possible way. 3 weeks into my hospital stay, my mother sent a text with photos attached. "Thought you might want to see how beautiful the shower turned out. Natalie was glowing. Everyone missed you." The images showed my parents' backyard transformed with twinkling lights and floral arrangements. My mother, father, and sister beamed in various poses with guests. They looked happy, carefree, as though they didn't have a daughter and sister lying in a hospital bed 3 hours away. I studied the photos for a long time, looking for any sign of concern or absence in their expressions. There was none. The celebration appeared complete without me. That night, I made a decision. I stopped checking for messages from my family. I asked Amanda to bring my laptop from my apartment, and I began researching what I would need for recovery after discharge. The hospital social worker Janice helped me understand my insurance coverage for home health care and continued outpatient therapy. "Do you have someone who can stay with you?" Janice asked during one of our planning sessions. "The first few weeks at home will be challenging. You won't be able to manage alone." Before I could formulate a response, Amanda stepped into the room for her daily visit. "She's staying with me," she announced without hesitation. "I've already cleared out my spare bedroom and bought a shower chair." I looked at my friend in surprise. We were close, but this level of commitment was unexpected. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It's a huge responsibility. I'll need help with everything." Amanda shrugged. "You'd do the same for me. Besides, my apartment is ground floor with no steps, perfect for someone with mobility issues." For the first time since the accident, I felt tears that weren't from pain or abandonment. These were tears of gratitude, of feeling valued despite my vulnerability. By my final day in the hospital, the count on my whiteboard read, "Days without family visit 31." A month had passed since the drunk driver had changed my life, and not once had my parents or sister made the 3-hour drive to see me. But as the nursing staff gathered for a small farewell celebration, bringing cupcakes and a card signed by everyone who had cared for me, I realized I wasn't leaving without family after all. I was just beginning to understand that family could be defined by actions rather than blood. The transition from hospital to Amanda's apartment marked the beginning of a new chapter in my recovery, both physical and emotional. Her ground floor unit in a modern building near Green Lake had wide doorways that accommodated the wheelchair I still needed for longer distances. The spare bedroom she had prepared for me faced east, filling with gentle morning light that helped ease me into each challenging day. "I rearranged some furniture to create clear pathways," Amanda explained as she wheeled me through the apartment on my first day home. "And I installed grab bars in the bathroom. My cousin's a contractor. He did it in an afternoon." The thoughtfulness of these preparations contrasted sharply with my family's absence. Amanda had transformed her home to meet my needs without hesitation, while my parents couldn't even make a single visit. The first week at Amanda's was a steep learning curve for both of us. My limitations were frustrating, needing help to bathe, to dress, to prepare meals. As a fiercely independent person and a healthcare professional accustomed to being the helper rather than the helped, accepting this role reversal was perhaps the hardest part of recovery. "I hate being a burden," I confessed one evening after Amanda had helped me through a particularly difficult shower routine. "You're not a burden, Elsa," she replied, handing me a towel. "You're my friend going through a tough time. There's a difference." My outpatient therapy schedule was intense physical therapy 3 times a week, occupational therapy twice weekly, and pain management consultations every other week. Amanda drove me to most appointments, arranging her work schedule around my needs until I was approved for medical transport services. During these early weeks, my parents' communication patterns shifted. After my initial refusal to answer their calls, they began sending texts and emails. Instead, digital knocks on the door that required no immediate response. "Checking in to see how you're doing. Dad and I are thinking of you." "Natalie had her 36-week appointment. Baby is healthy and right on schedule." "Your Aunt Martha asked about you at Sunday dinner. Everyone sends their love." These messages arrived with increasing frequency, their tone suggesting nothing was amiss in our relationship. It was as if they believed that by pretending the abandonment hadn't occurred, it would somehow be erased from reality. I read each message but rarely responded, and when I did, my replies were brief and factual. "Starting outpatient therapy. Wheelchair for another month at least. Pain manageable with medication. Sleeping better." 2 months after the accident, I joined a support group for trauma survivors at the recommendation of my occupational therapist. The weekly meetings were held in a community center 15 minutes from Amanda's apartment, and medical transport could take me there independently, a small but significant step toward reclaiming autonomy. The group consisted of 12 people with varied experiences: car accidents, workplace injuries, violent crimes, medical traumas. Despite the differences in our situations, the emotional aftermath shared striking similarities: the sense of violation, the struggle to accept a changed body, the renegotiation of identity after trauma. During my third session, I met Thomas, a former construction worker, who had survived a 5-story fall when scaffolding collapsed. His physical injuries had largely healed in the year since his accident, but he still attended the group to work through the emotional aspects of his trauma. "The body recovers faster than the mind," he shared during one session, "and relationships are often the slowest to heal." Something in his expression suggested personal experience with this observation, After the meeting, as people gathered around the refreshment table, I maneuvered my wheelchair beside him. "That comment about relationships, it really resonated with me," I said, introducing myself. Thomas nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. "My wife couldn't handle the changes after my accident. The mood swings, the depression, the financial strain. She stuck around for the first 3 months, then filed for divorce." "I'm sorry," I replied. "My experience is different but similar in some ways. My family, they never even visited me in the hospital. Not once in a month." His eyes widened with genuine shock. "Not once? That's—" He trailed off, seemingly searching for a word adequate to the situation. "Yeah," I agreed. "It's something." We exchanged numbers after that meeting, and Thomas began texting regularly to check on my progress. Unlike the hollow messages from my family, his inquiries felt authentic, born from personal understanding rather than obligation. Sometimes he would share articles about trauma recovery or send links to adaptive equipment that had helped him during his own rehabilitation. 3 months post-accident, I received a flurry of messages from my family. Natalie had given birth to a healthy baby boy named James after our father. The texts included hospital photos of my nephew cradled by my beaming parents. "We can't wait for you to meet him," my mother wrote. "When can we bring him up to see you? Or are you able to travel yet?" The message carried no acknowledgement of the irony: their immediate hospital visit for Natalie versus their complete absence during my hospitalization. It demonstrated either astounding lack of self-awareness or deliberate denial of their behavior. After consultation with my therapist, whom I had started seeing to process the family dynamics, I composed a careful response. "Congratulations on baby James. I'm not ready for visitors or travel yet. We'll let you know when that changes." My therapist, Dr. Laurel, had been helping me understand the concept of boundaries, something I had never successfully established with my family. "Your trauma created a forced separation," she explained during one session. "It's providing an opportunity to reset relationships on healthier terms if that's what you want." "I don't know what I want," I admitted. "Part of me misses them despite everything. Another part is so angry I can barely think about them without feeling physically ill." "Both responses are valid," she assured me. "Healing isn't linear, and it doesn't require immediate forgiveness or reconciliation." With Dr. Laurel's guidance, I began journaling about my family relationships, tracing patterns back to childhood. The journal entries revealed a consistent theme: my role as the accommodating daughter, the one who adjusted her needs and expectations to maintain family harmony. I also rediscovered old passions that had been set aside in my pursuit of family approval. Before focusing exclusively on my career, I had been an amateur photographer, finding peace in capturing Pacific Northwest landscapes. Amanda surprised me with a lightweight digital camera, adapted with a strap that made it manageable even with my limited mobility. "The physical therapist said activities that bring you joy are essential to recovery," she explained. "And there's a photography club that meets in the park across the street." 4 months after the accident, I was able to take my first steps without a walker, just a few careful paces with a quad cane, but the achievement felt monumental. The physical therapist captured a video of the moment, which I watched repeatedly that evening, marveling at the body's capacity for healing. I shared this milestone with Thomas over coffee at a cafe near the support group meeting place. It was the first time we had met outside the group setting, and seeing him in casual clothes, rather than the therapy circle, created a subtle shift in our dynamic. "I remember my first steps," he said, watching the video on my phone. "Felt like learning to walk all over again." "Exactly," I agreed. "Like being a toddler with an adult's awareness of how far there is to fall." Our conversation flowed easily, from recovery milestones to favorite Seattle restaurants to books we'd read during convalescence. As afternoon stretched into early evening, I realized this was the first time since the accident that I had forgotten about my injuries for extended periods, laughing and talking without the constant undercurrent of pain and limitation. The next day, Amanda helped me look at apartment listings. After almost 5 months of her generous hospitality, I was ready to reclaim my independence in a space of my own. We focused on accessible buildings near my outpatient therapy center, eventually finding a one-bedroom unit in a modern complex with elevator access and wheelchair-friendly design. "Are you sure you're ready?" Amanda asked as we submitted the application. You know you're welcome to stay as long as you need. I'm sure, I replied. You've given me the greatest gift support through the darkest time, but I need to start rebuilding my life on my terms. The following week, I returned to work at the rehabilitation center on a part-time basis. My role had been modified to accommodate my ongoing recovery consultation, rather than hands-on therapy and reduced hours. Still crossing the threshold of the building as an employee, rather than a patient, marked a profound transition. My colleagues welcomed me with a small celebration in the break room, complete with a cake decorated with the words, "Our hero returns." Many of them had visited me in the hospital or during my stay at Amanda's, but seeing them in our professional setting carried different emotional weight. How does it feel to be back? My supervisor asked as the gathering dispersed. Surreal, I admitted. Like I'm straddling two worlds, still a patient in some contexts, but a professional in others. That unique perspective will make you an even better therapist, she suggested. You understand the journey from both sides now. As I settled into this new phase of recovery, my parents' attempts at contact became more persistent. Their messages carried an increasingly urgent tone, as though they were becoming aware that the silence between us represented something more significant than temporary distance. My father called one evening as I was preparing dinner in my new apartment. After 5 months of screening their calls, I answered a decision prompted partly by curiosity and partly by the growing strength I felt in my recovered identity. Elsa. His voice carried surprise that I had actually picked up. It's so good to hear your voice. Hello, Dad. I replied, my tone neutral. How are you? Your mother and I have been so worried. The claim of worry after their complete absence during my hospitalization ignited a spark of anger that I carefully contained. I'm managing, making progress. That's good, he said, an awkward pause following. Listen, Elsa, we've been thinking. It's been too long. We want to see you. Your mother, me, Natalie, the baby. We're thinking of driving up next weekend. What do you say? The question hung between us, weighted with months of unacknowledged hurt. In the silence, I could almost hear the creaking of a door not closing, but not quite open either. I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, my father's question about visiting still hanging in the air. The quad cane I used for support around the apartment was propped against the counter, a constant reminder of how much had changed since the accident. Through the window, Seattle's early autumn light cast long shadows across my small balcony. Elsa, are you still there? My father prompted. I took a deep breath. Yes, I'm here. I'm just surprised by the suggestion. My voice remained steady, though my heart was racing. Well, it's been months. We want to see how you're doing. And you haven't met James yet. He's almost 3 months old now. The casual way he referenced the passage of time as though it had been a normal separation, rather than their complete abandonment during my greatest need, sent a wave of indignation through me. That would be quite a full house, I said, deflecting slightly. My apartment isn't very large. Oh, we'd get a hotel, he assured me quickly. We wouldn't impose. Just come by for a visit, maybe take you out to dinner if you're up for it. I considered my options. Dr. Laurel had been helping me prepare for an eventual confrontation with my family, but I hadn't expected it to happen so soon or on their terms. Let me think about it and get back to you, I replied, unwilling to commit in the moment. Of course, my father said, though I detected disappointment in his tone. We just miss you, Elsa. After ending the call, I immediately texted Thomas. Family wants to visit next weekend. Not sure I'm ready. His response came quickly. Whatever you decide, remember you control the terms now. I spent the evening weighing the decision-making lists of pros and cons as Dr. Laurel had taught me. By morning, I had reached a conclusion. I called my father back. You can visit, I said when he answered, but just for a couple of hours on Saturday afternoon. I'm still in recovery and tire easily. That's wonderful, Elsa. His enthusiasm seemed genuine. We'll work around whatever timing is best for you. We agreed on a time and I provided my address. After hanging up, I felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. This would be difficult, but perhaps necessary for my emotional healing. I spent the week preparing not just my apartment, but myself. I had sessions with Dr. Laurel, discussed strategies with my support group, and even practiced potential conversations with Amanda. By Saturday morning, I felt as ready as I could be. They arrived precisely at the agreed time. The doorbell rang, and I took a steadying breath before opening the door with one hand, the other gripping my cane for both physical and emotional support. My parents stood there, my father holding a bouquet of lilies, my mother clutching a gift bag with tissue paper sprouting from the top. Behind them, Natalie balanced a car seat with baby James sleeping peacefully inside. Their expressions registered shock as they took in my appearance. Despite 5 months of healing, the accident had left its marks. I was thinner than before, my formerly athletic frame now leaner from muscle loss. A faint scar ran along my jawline where glass from the shattered windshield had cut me. And of course, there was the cane, an accessory they had never seen me use. "Elsa," my mother breathed, her eyes widening. "You look different," I supplied when she trailed off. "Come in." They filed into my apartment, glancing around at the modest furnishings. I had chosen a minimalist aesthetic, partly from preference and partly for practicality. Fewer obstacles meant easier navigation during my recovery. "Nice place," my father commented, handing me the lilies. "Very you." "Thanks," I replied, accepting the flowers. "Let me put these in water. Please sit down." As I moved slowly to the kitchen, I could feel their eyes following me, cataloging each careful step and balance adjustment. I took longer than necessary arranging the flowers, using the task to collect myself before the inevitable conversation. When I returned to the living room, they had settled onto my sofa. Natalie had removed James from his car seat and was cradling him in her arms. "Would you like to meet your nephew?" she asked, her voice gentle. I nodded and eased myself into the armchair across from them. Natalie stood and carefully transferred the sleeping baby into my arms, showing me how to support his head. Looking down at his peaceful face, I felt a complex rush of emotions, tenderness for this innocent child, mixed with lingering hurt toward his mother and grandparents. "He's beautiful," I said truthfully. "Takes after his aunt," my father offered with a tentative smile. An uncomfortable silence followed, broken only when my mother thrust the gift bag toward me. "We brought you something. Just a little welcome home present." I handed James back to Natalie before accepting the bag. Inside was a cashmere throw blanket in my favorite shade of blue. "For those chilly Seattle evenings," my mother explained. "I remember you saying your old apartment was always cold." "Thank you," I said, running my fingers over the soft material. "It's lovely." Another silence descended, this one heavier with all the unspoken words between us. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "So, how are you doing, really? You're back at work?" "Part-time," I confirmed. "Consultation mostly. No hands-on therapy yet." "And the recovery?" "The doctors are happy with your progress," my mother asked. "As happy as can be expected. There's still pain, still limitations. Some things may never return to how they were before." My mother nodded sympathetically, but I could see she was struggling to truly comprehend the magnitude of what I had experienced. How could she when she had deliberately absent herself from the worst of it? "We've been so worried," she said, echoing my father's claim from our phone call. "All these months thinking about you up here, going through all this alone." Something in her phrasing, the passive way she described their worry without acknowledging their choice not to act on it, finally broke the dam of politeness I had constructed for this visit. "Were you?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. "Worried enough to visit me in the hospital, worried enough to be there during the surgeries or the first painful steps in physical therapy, worried enough to help me when I couldn't dress myself or bathe without assistance?" My parents exchanged glances, the atmosphere in the room shifting palpably. "Elsa," my father began, his tone placating. "We wanted to come, but the timing with Natalie's baby shower and then the birth." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't pretend this was just unfortunate timing. You made choices. Every day for a month that I was in the hospital, you chose not to make the 3-hour drive to see me. Your daughter, who nearly died." My mother's face flushed. "That's not fair, Elsa. We were caught in an impossible situation. Natalie needed us too." "I'm not saying Natalie didn't need support. I clarified, gesturing toward my sister who sat uncomfortably bouncing James on her knee. I'm saying your response wasn't balanced. It wasn't even close. Mom was just following my lead, my father interjected defensively. I was the one who suggested we wait until after the shower. The preparations were already in motion, deposits paid, guests RSVP'd. My mother shot him a look of surprise, clearly not expecting him to shift responsibility onto himself. And you both decided a party was more important than being with your critically injured daughter. I summarized, my voice steady despite the emotion coursing through me. It wasn't just a party, my mother protested. It was a celebration of new life, of Natalie's journey to motherhood. While I was fighting for my life and then learning to walk again, I added. Alone. You weren't alone, my father countered. You had the hospital staff, your friends. Yes, I did. Thank God for them. But that doesn't excuse your absence. The room fell silent again, the weight of truth finally acknowledged hanging heavily between us. My mother wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. We made a mistake, Elsa. A terrible mistake. When you called that day and I laughed, she paused, swallowing hard. I've replayed that moment in my mind 1,000 times. I don't know why I reacted that way. I do, I said quietly. It wasn't a momentary lapse or a single bad decision. It was the culmination of a lifetime of patterns, of Natalie's needs always coming first, of me being expected to be the strong one, the independent one, the one who doesn't need as much. My father shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. That's not true. We've always loved you both equally. Love isn't just a feeling, Dad. It's actions. And your actions have consistently shown favoritism toward Natalie. My sister looked up sharply at this. That's not fair, Elsa. Mom and Dad have always been there for both of us. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Thomas calling at the prearranged time we had set up as a potential escape hatch if the visit became too difficult. I need to take this, I said, grateful for the momentary reprieve. I answered the call, explaining briefly that my family was visiting and that I would call him back later. As I set the phone down, I noticed my mother studying me with curiosity. New friend? She asked, a hint of her normal prying tone emerging. Yes, I replied, simply not elaborating. My mother seemed about to ask more questions when my father interrupted. Elsa, we know we hurt you deeply. We can see that now. But we want to make it right. Tell us how to fix this. His question was earnest, but revealed how little he understood the situation. There was no quick fix, no single action that could erase months of abandonment or years of subtle favoritism. It's not that simple, I explained. Trust once broken doesn't mend easily, especially when the break confirms fears you've had your whole life. What fears? My mother asked, genuinely confused. That when it really matters, when the chips are down, I'm not as important. That my needs are secondary. That I'm loved conditionally, admired for my strength and independence, but not supported in vulnerability. My words landed like physical blows. My mother's face crumpled while my father looked away, unable to maintain eye contact. Natalie stared down at her son, tears dropping silently onto his blanket. I never realized you felt that way, my mother whispered. I thought you preferred being independent, that you didn't need us fussing over you like we did with Natalie. Everyone needs support sometimes, Mom. Everyone needs to know they matter to the people who are supposed to love them most. The conversation continued for another hour, circling through years of miscommunications and hurtful patterns. My parents veered between defensive justifications and tearful apologies. Natalie mostly listened, occasionally offering her own perspective on our shared childhood. By the time they prepared to leave, emotional exhaustion had settled over all of us. No neat resolution had been reached, no perfect reconciliation achieved. But truth had been spoken, acknowledged, and left to sit between us, uncomfortable but necessary. At the door, my mother hugged me tentatively. Can we call you visit again? Yes, I replied. But on my terms. I need time and space to process everything, and I need you to respect that. We will, my father promised, looking older than when he had arrived. We want to be part of your life, Elsa. After they left, I collapsed onto my sofa physically and emotionally drained. The apartment felt emptier, yet somehow clearer, as though the air had been purified by the difficult truths spoken within its walls. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "How did it go?" I typed back. "Exhausting, painful, necessary. Can you come over?" His reply was immediate. "On my way." When Thomas arrived 30 minutes later, I recounted the conversation while he listened attentively, offering neither judgment nor platitudes, just the quiet support I had been denied for so long by those who should have provided it first. 6 months had passed since the night a drunk driver changed the course of my life. Outside my apartment window, Seattle's winter had given way to spring cherry blossoms dotting the park across the street with bursts of pink against the gray sky. The physical recovery had progressed steadily. I now walked with only occasional use of a cane on particularly painful days, and I had returned to work 3 days a week at the rehabilitation center. The emotional healing had been more complicated following a less linear path than my physical recovery. There were still days when anger would surface unexpectedly, prompted by a casual mention of family loyalty in a TV show, or the sight of a mother and daughter shopping together at the grocery store. But those moments had become less frequent, less consuming. My relationship with my family had entered a cautious rebuilding phase. After the confrontation in my apartment, we had established new patterns of communication: weekly phone calls with clear time limits, occasional video chats where I could see baby James growing, and carefully negotiated boundaries about what topics were open for discussion. My mother had surprised me by suggesting she attend therapy herself, something I never would have expected from a woman who had always dismissed psychological support as unnecessary for strong people. Whether her sessions were yielding insights I couldn't say for certain, but her communications had become more thoughtful, less presumptive. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told me during a recent call, "about how we expected you to be the strong one. I never realized how unfair that was, putting that burden on you from such a young age." My father, less verbally expressive but equally chastened by our confrontation, had taken to sending care packages, practical items for my apartment books he thought I might enjoy, specialty foods from my childhood. Small gestures that acknowledged my independent life while trying to maintain connection. Natalie and I had begun to forge a relationship separate from our parents, sister to sister, without the competitive dynamic that had characterized our childhood interactions. She would call when James reached new milestones, sending videos and photos, without the expectation that I would respond with the same enthusiasm our parents displayed. It was a more honest exchange, allowing me to be a loving aunt, without erasing the hurt that still lingered. "He rolled over for the first time yesterday," she shared during one call. "But that's probably not as impressive when you've helped adults relearn to walk after trauma." "Every milestone matters," I assured her, "just in different ways." My professional perspective had been fundamentally transformed by my experience as a patient. I returned to the rehabilitation center with new insights into the emotional journey of recovery. My supervisor had created a special role for me, leading a program for patients transitioning from hospital to home care, a critical period I now understood intimately. "You speak their language now," she observed after watching me work with a recent car accident survivor. "Not just the technical aspects, but the emotional landscape. That can't be taught." I had also begun teaching workshops for families of trauma patients, helping them understand both the practical and emotional support their loved ones needed. The irony wasn't lost on me, using my family's failures as a template for what not to do, but the work felt healing, transforming personal pain into something constructive. Thomas had become a constant presence in my life. What began as mutual support through trauma recovery had evolved into something deeper, more complete. He understood aspects of my experience that even my closest friends couldn't fully grasp: the way pain could become an unwelcome companion, how trauma recalibrated one's sense of what mattered, the invisible scars that remained after physical wounds had healed. Our relationship progressed slowly, mindfully, both of us carrying histories that made us cautious. But there was freedom in building something new with someone who knew my story and accepted its complexities without judgment. My living situation had stabilized in the accessible apartment I had found after staying with Amanda. I had made it my own. Over the months, photographs I had taken during recovery outings lined the walls. Plants thrived on every windowsill, and a special corner was dedicated to my physical therapy equipment. It was a space that honored both who I had been before the accident and who I was becoming after it. Amanda remained my closest friend, our bond strengthened by the months she had helped care for me. We had established a Sunday dinner tradition at her apartment, often joined by Thomas and others from my support group. These gatherings had replaced the Sunday phone calls with my parents that had once structured my weekends. "You've created your own family," Dr. Laurel noted during one of our now monthly sessions. "Not to replace your biological one, but to supplement it in ways that meet your actual needs." I never realized how much I was trying to extract from relationships that weren't designed to provide what I needed, I admitted. It's liberating to build connections based on who people actually are, rather than who I wish they were. This realization had guided my approach to rebuilding with my biological family. I no longer expected them to be something they weren't capable of being. My mother would always tend toward dramatic emotions and favoritism. My father would always prefer avoiding conflict to addressing it directly. Natalie would always navigate between pleasing our parents and establishing her own identity. Accepting these truths didn't mean excusing their behavior during my crisis, but it allowed me to engage with them authentically rather than through a lens of perpetual disappointment. In late April, my parents visited Seattle again. This time I suggested meeting at a restaurant rather than my apartment-neutral territory that allowed for easier entry and exit from the interaction. The dinner was neither perfect nor disastrous, just people doing their imperfect best to connect across a divide, partly of their creation, partly of circumstance. As they prepared to leave, my mother handed me an envelope. "We've been thinking about your workshops for families of trauma patients," she said. "We'd like to make a donation to the program." Inside the envelope was a check with a substantial amount, not life-changing, but significant enough to expand the workshop series considerably. The gesture acknowledged both my professional work and implicitly their failure to embody the principles I now taught. "Thank you," I said simply. "This will help a lot of families do better than we did." My father winced slightly at the bluntness, but my mother nodded. "That's what we hoped." After they left, I walked home slowly, enjoying the cool evening air and the cherry blossoms scattered across the sidewalk. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas, "Still on for movie night." I smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. Bring that popcorn you promised." As I approached my building, I paused to take a photograph of the sunset reflecting off the windows, another image for my growing collection documenting this chapter of my life. The act of capturing these moments had become a form of therapy, a way of saying, "I am here. I am continuing. I am creating beauty even after destruction." The journey of the past 6 months had taught me that healing doesn't mean erasing what happened or pretending the scars don't exist. It means incorporating the experience into a new understanding of yourself and your relationships. It means setting boundaries that protect your well-being while remaining open to connection. It means recognizing that sometimes the deepest wounds come not from metal and glass, but from the actions or inactions of those we expected to catch us when we fall. As I entered my apartment and prepared for the evening ahead, I reflected on how trauma forces a reckoning with priorities, with relationships, with self. The drunk driver had stolen my physical wholeness for a time, but the experience had given me something I might never have found. Otherwise, the courage to demand authenticity in my relationships, and the wisdom to build a life defined by chosen connections rather than obligatory ones. Family, I had learned, is not merely who shares your blood. Family is who shows up, who stays, who helps you navigate the broken places and celebrates when you find your way through. Sometimes those people are the ones who raised you. Sometimes they're the ones you find along the way. And sometimes, most importantly, it includes the person you become for yourself when you finally understand your own worth. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship after a betrayal or disappointment? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more about navigating family dynamics and building resilience through life's unexpected challenges. Like and share if you know someone who might need to hear that it's okay to create boundaries with family when necessary. Thank you for being part of my healing journey. And remember, sometimes the family we choose matters just as much as the family we're born into.